Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is said that Africa is the cradle of mankind, and I believe it. So I want to bring you greetings from home. I studied geography at some point, and all the other continents have moved, others to the east, others to the west, but Africa has remained in place. And it is waiting for its children to come back home. The topic of my discussion this morning is Africa Rising, the challenges and opportunities for IP owners. The narrative of Africa has changed. In 2003, The Economist magazine out of the United States labeled Africa the hopeless continent. But in December 2013, the same magazine predicted that the continent's impressive growth is likely to continue. I've come here to tell a story that he has not been told about the readiness of Africa to do business and the readiness of Africa to participate in the global intellectual property discussion. Sitting in the sessions of this convention over the past day, I had discussion about what is happening in Europe, what is happening in Asia, but nothing about what is happening in Africa. And then I concluded I'm in the right place because somebody has to say something about the IP agenda in Africa. So the Economist, 10 years after their initial publication, apologized for their Afro-pessimism, and they concluded that a profound change has taken hold of the region. So those are two cover pages of the same publications, separated by a period of 10 years. And we have a new narrative out of Africa, from hopeless to rising, and its effect. But some may say, let's separate between wishful thinking and reality. Where is the evidence of Africa's rise? And where is the opportunity for IPR owners and global business? It is a fact, and you can check with the World Economic Forum, that Africa has an expanding middle class, estimated at around 700 million people. And those are a population that is conscious about labels, that is conscious about brands, that wants to differentiate itself from the rest of the population by catching the current trends. So if they are brand product producers, that's a market there for you. And most of them are in their middle ages, so you have a market for the next 30 or 40 years. It is also a fact that there's been very drastic improvement in education in Africa. That means there are people that are ready and that are able to participate in the innovation agenda, if I'm to borrow from what Doug was sharing with us a few moments earlier. The whole innovation discourse. Africa is ready for innovation. We have a reasonably educated population, which is young, which is enthusiastic, which is energetic, and which is ready to participate together with the rest of the world. We have probably one of the highest mobile penetrations of the global south. And we have had other innovations riding on the mobile penetration. Mobile money emerged out of Africa, and it is spreading to other parts of the world as a manifestation of the innovative genius of the African people. Now we have greater access to credit. Every 3 years, our life expectancy increases by a year. There has been lower corruption across the continent. We used to have an enviable reputation of corruption, but I am glad to report that it is diminishing, and it shall continue to diminish. We also have very productive urban centers. We have cosmopolitan cities. People would talk of Johannesburg. People would talk of Lagos. People would talk of Nairobi. Emerging cosmopolitan cities that are hubs of international business. Just a couple of years ago, Coca-Cola shifted their head office for the African region from the UK to Johannesburg. IBM is building their biggest innovation hub in the global south, in Nairobi, Kenya. And a whole host of other global companies are now paying attention to Africa. So Africa is expected to grow exponentially until 2050. And to achieve a gross national product greater than the US and Europe combined by 2050. As we speak right now, 11 out of the 20 fastest growing economies are in sub-Saharan Africa, and 7 out of 10 fastest growing economies, according to the World Economic Forum 2014, are in Africa. So that tells the story of a region that cannot afford to be ignored anymore. That tells the story of a future. By 2050, Africa will have the youngest population in the world. And the youthfulness of the population talks about the horizon of opportunity going into the future. So if there is any hope for the future, that hope lies in Africa. So, Dave Lale, Africa's best-known fashion designer, says, Africa is no longer just a source of ethnic inspiration, but a fountain of original talent that brings fresh blood to the international fashion industry. And I can add, not only the fashion industry, any other industry that you can think about. There are very few things that the Time magazine and the Economist would agree on. But Time has also confirmed what the Economist has said. And that is, Africa is the world's economic powerhouse. And in 2014, Time's cover and article inside had exactly the same title as the Economist's title a year earlier, and that is Africa is Rising. The chairman of and executive of Emirates Airlines, probably speaking on behalf of other global business leaders, says Emirates has long understood the enormous potential of Africa, which today is one of the fastest growing or fastest expanding economic regions of the world, benefiting from over 1 billion people, rising consumer demand, and an abundance of natural resources. And Coca-Cola, during the 2010 Soccer World Cup, had a promotional which says 1 billion reasons to believe in Africa. So where are the opportunities on the IPR front? Most African countries have updated their laws, and some are continuing to update their laws to make them TRIPS compliant. So the basic minimum standards of protection as enshrined in the TRIPS agreement would be available for you as soon as you set your foot on the African continent. Regional trading blocs such as the Common Market for East and Southern Africa, the Southern African Development Community, are adopting IP policies and promoting the IP agenda. Last year at this conference in Mumbai, the Director General of the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization was one of the keynote speakers. And the story is true. The best level of protection that you can get anywhere else in the world is also available in Africa. The human resource capacity in administration and enforcement of IP has significantly improved thanks to the programs of the World Intellectual Property Organization through its development agenda. And I'm sure you are very convinced, looking at me right now, that they did a very good job. I am a product of the Masters in Intellectual Property program that is funded by the World Intellectual Property Organization, which is in its 7th year running in Zimbabwe right at the moment. And that has built a critical mass of very competent, very well equipped, very qualified IP personnel. At national level, quite a number of African countries are crafting national IP policies with the aim of unlocking creativity and innovation, as well as attracting foreign direct investment. So everything is coming into place in order to prepare Africa to receive and protect IP. And also the cost of protection and enforcement of IP rights is significantly lower in Africa, both at national level and at regional level. Where the US Patent and Trademarks Office levies a basic trademark application fee of $325 per international class per filing, the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization levies less than a third of that. And the attorney or the agent's fees are also significantly lower in Africa because the industry is still in its nascent stage, and we are a new generation of IP practitioners that are very flexible, but also very eager to impress. Regional IP organizations such as ARIPO, which serves the English-speaking African countries in East and Southern Africa, and the OAPI, serving French-speaking Central and West African countries, are also doing a tremendous job in promoting recognition and respect of intellectual property rights in Africa. And the African Union has also picked the torch through the Pan-African Intellectual Property Organization. So at every level, from local level to continental level, everybody has embraced the IP agenda, and they are doing everything within their capacity to ensure that the IP agenda is given the importance that it deserves. But also there are opportunities to invest in other areas in Africa, and your investment will be protected. Any IP rights that may be associated with such investment will be respected, and energy, clean water supply, food security are some of the issues that present huge opportunities for anybody who intends to do business in Africa. Most African countries are requiring beneficiation of natural resources, and they would do everything necessary to attract FDI, including stepping up their IP enforcement systems. Many African countries are prepared to enter into bilateral agreements, bilateral trade protection agreements, and are keen to sustain such relations through upholding the rights and privileges extended to investors. And these invariably include intellectual property rights. A lot has been said about the abundance of natural resources which support most types of businesses. But I should hasten to say, in 2014, I was privileged to be part of President Obama's Young African Leaders Initiative in DC. And he says, far from the biggest resource of Africa being its natural resources, its biggest resource is the intellectual capital of its people. But it's a given fact, our natural resources are much more abundant than what people have estimated. There's significant presence of intellectual talent for research, and most governments are prepared to support those initiatives. But I would be a hypocrite if I only gave the good side of the potential that Africa represents. We still have a few challenges, but I believe those challenges can be overcome. Some of the challenges include relatively weak, and I say relatively because the impression that has been given is that there is either no or very weak IP enforcement mechanism. That is not entirely correct. We have, in many countries, enforcement mechanisms. Stories like Zambia, stories like Zimbabwe, stories like South Africa, where the police service has a specialized intellectual property unit, and there is ongoing training to build capacity for enforcement. But compared to advanced countries, it then becomes relatively weaker. But there is room for improvement, and there is a willingness to improve it. There's also limited institutional capacity for prosecution and enforcement, but the